Absolutely. I mean, the defense relationship in Djibouti makes particular sense because China's very involved in anti-piracy efforts off the coast of Somalia. So that port really fits in with that strategic goal. I think the question is really about what is China's defense role going to be in Africa going forward, given that it has this economic interest, given that it has this growing peacekeeping role in the continent. It will need sort of bases from which it can operate militarily in the region, and that doesn't have to be a threat, as the peacekeeping efforts show. It can really be making a positive contribution to regional stability. But I think the concern from a lot of other partners is exactly what role is China going to be playing in the region, how's it going to fit with existing military organizations and security forums. So it's really this sort of unsettling element of something new coming into the equation that's got a lot of people concerned.
And of course, these questions also relate to what kind of future role is China going to continue to play on the investment front. Now, we traditionally think of the role they play in agriculture, the resources that, of course, come back to China to meet the demands there. But what are the other areas going forward where you think that Chinese companies perhaps have heightened interest in Africa in?
Yeah, I mean, China's economic role in Africa is really sort of spans a lot of different elements. And I think when we're talking a lot about what China's role is, we quite often think of the big companies. So to date, that's been really dominated by mining. But we have been seeing them getting involved in infrastructure construction, in railways, ports, even things like free trade zones in countries like Ethiopia. So I think, that is not going to go away. China will still need commodities and Africa will still be an important supplier. I think that agricultural relationship, it's often overstressed by some at the moment, but certainly going forward, it's got huge potential. But I think also we're going to see Chinese companies increasingly look to move up the value chain in Africa, targeting more sophisticated products as Africa's consumer markets develop. And particularly in areas like sort of finance, for example, where Chinese companies are relatively scarce on the ground at the moment, and areas like e-commerce, which is developing fast. So these are going to be areas of interest to Chinese companies in the continent over the next few years.
And Duncan, we can't talk about this relationship in isolation from the other big story we've been tracking recently, of course, the trade tensions between China and the United States. And when you talk about China getting involved in ports and infrastructures in Africa, it's not just Africa, of course. They have a massive Belt and Road initiative that spans so many countries, different continents as well. Is it fair to say there's a real contrast then being drawn between what China is doing, stretching out to the world, and the U.S. that appears to be almost going more insular?
Absolutely. I mean, the US is really withdrawing from the international stage in a lot of different ways. And you're seeing that in cuts in the State Department and sort of many other different aspects. China is certainly looking to step into that gap and is exploiting it to the full. I think it's also fair to say that there's a lot of other countries that are looking to step into that gap. So you see Japan and India also stepping up their activity. And I think, to be realistic, it's going to be these countries that are providing the competition, particularly for infrastructure construction in Africa, rather than companies from the US.